Thank you, Thodoris. Thank you for this excellent organization, as always. And taking this opportunity, I would like also to inform our friend Giles that this conference is one of the most important renewables conferences in Greece. And the success of this conference is also due to the fact that many years ago, it started focusing exclusively on renewables. And it used to be, and it still is, the conference which promoted renewables in Greece. That's why we are always happy to be there, supporting and collaborating with Thodoris Panagoulis, who is an excellent supporter of renewables and especially wind. So, thank you for your presence.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. Delighted to be here.
I have read, Giles, your interview at the Greek newspaper Tovima last Sunday, and I noticed an optimism, a slight optimism, about the status and the prospects of our industry at European level, of the European wind energy industry, both in terms of the manufacturers and also in the rest supply chain. However, there are a lot of challenges. Can you tell us more?
Of course, yes. So wind is 20% of all of the electricity that we now consume across Europe. Of course, it's slightly more in Greece, and congratulations to all of you in the wind industry for the excellent job that you are doing, building new wind farms, operating, maintaining the existing wind farms, and now starting to think about the development of offshore wind. So 20%, that's not bad. By 2030, the European Union want wind to be 35% of all of the electricity we consume. And that means we've got to build between now and 2030 twice as many new wind farms every year as we have been building. We are going to increase the number of wind farms that we build, but we will fall just a little bit short of the very ambitious target that the EU has set us. Nevertheless, things are looking good. What is especially encouraging is that in the European wind energy supply chain, things are turning around. The supply chain has had a very challenging past 3 or 4 years. There was a moment when all the turbine manufacturers were losing money because their costs had gone up, but their revenues had not gone up by as much. Now they are recovering, and most of them are back in the black. The European Union has helped to make this happen. Last year, they adopted the EU wind power package with a series of immediate measures to strengthen Europe's wind energy supply chain, new counter-guarantees from the European Investment Bank, additional support from national authorities for factory investments. And this is one of the reasons why the supply chain is recovering. It's been helped also by a stabilization of the input costs. But the supply chain is recovering, and it's growing. And this is the really good thing. There are now 30 different new factory investments currently underway across Europe for new wind turbine factories, foundations for offshore turbines, cables for the grid connections to the offshore wind farms, new transformer factories, converter platforms for the offshore substations, new tower factories. This is great. They're using the new support that the EU is giving, and they're responding to the demand from the wind farm developers and from governments that we need to be building more wind. So the central message is this. We're growing the wind turbine manufacturing capacity in Europe. By the end of next year, every year we'll be able to make 22.5 gigawatts of onshore wind turbines and 9.5 gigawatts of offshore wind turbines. And that is enough to meet the growing demand that Europe has.
Very nice, but all these are related also with permitting. And we see among Europe different speeds. There are countries which accelerate more than other countries. There are also different speeds among the different technologies. How do we stand in front of this?
The European Union recognized a few years ago that the permitting of wind and solar was a mess. And they brought in new rules. As of the 1st of July this year, the expansion of wind and solar in every member state of the EU has to be treated as a matter of overriding public interest. And well done to Greece for having implemented this. It's on the national statute book already, this new legal concept of overriding public interest. In addition, all the permit decisions now have to be taken within 2 years. The protection of biodiversity has moved back to the original common sense, protect the overall population numbers approach, rather than striving to protect every single bird, animal, or fish. And crucially, it's now a binding obligation for every country in Europe to fully digitalize their permitting processes. These new rules are coming into effect, and they are a game changer. Germany was the first country to implement this overriding public interest. What happened? The judges, they were getting appeals against the permits that have been awarded for onshore wind turbines. They used to get loads of appeals. And before overriding public interest came in, those challenging the permits would say they go against EU biodiversity rules, Habitats Directive, Birds Directive. And the judges would look at the complaint and they'd say, well, yeah, those rules apply here. And on the renewables side, well, there's a binding EU target, but that doesn't mean we have to build the wind farm here. So, okay, fine. You've complained. I agree with your complaint. No wind farm. Now, with overriding public interest, the judges have the biodiversity rules here, and they have to balance them with the fact that more wind and more solar is now a matter of overriding public interest. And so overnight in Germany, when this legal concept came in, German judges started ruling in favor of the wind permits. We had 3 judgments only. That was all it took in our favor. And what happened? The opponents stopped appealing because they could see they were now more likely to lose than win. So the appeals went down dramatically, and the civil servants in the permitting authorities thought, ooh, hey, this is good. I can issue a permit now, and that judge in the local court, he's got my back. He's going to support me. And it gave a new confidence to the civil servants, which they did not have before. And what has happened? The civil servants are now producing 4 times as many permits for onshore wind farms in Germany as they were 4 years ago. This year, Germany will permit 13,000 megawatts of new onshore wind farms. This is extraordinary.
And this is very important because there are a lot of populist voices in Greece saying that Germany is abandoning wind energy, while the reality is exactly the opposite.
Absolutely.
Germany is accelerating wind energy.
Yes, indeed.
Indeed, very nice. Apart from permitting, we have also the issue of the grid connection terms. And we see among Europe that there are countries which have introduced criteria for awarding new grid connection licenses. Others have not. Are we going to expect from EU some more binding rules, some more binding guidelines on this issue?
The EU woke up about a year ago to the fact that grid operators across Europe have been treating every application for a grid permit equally. First come, first serve. You apply, we will review your application. And we will treat you equally to every other application. Okay, in the spirit of equality, that's quite nice. But we all know there are lots of speculative projects applying for grid permits that do not deserve to have people in the grid operators or regulators wasting their time looking at their permit applications. because their projects are speculative. And yet the huge volume of these speculative projects was clogging up the system. So the EU said about a year ago, okay, no more of this. Let's be strategic about how we process grid permit applications. There's nothing in EU law that says you have to treat every application equally. There's no EU requirement for first come, first served, not at all. So the EU is now saying, be strategic, prioritize, filter, triage, whatever word you want to use. Sift out the speculative ones. And Greece has been one of the first countries to apply this principle, and well done to IPTO and the regulator and the government for doing this and introducing criteria. You've got to get the criteria right, of course. And crucially, the most important criterion should be, where are the strategically important projects? Let's look at their grid applications first and get them through and get them connected to the grid. Can I add one further point on what is strategically important?
This is my question.
Okay. It is strategically important, it is vital that Greece and every other country in Europe not only expands renewables as quickly as possible, but does so in a way that the build-out of solar and wind is balanced. It doesn't work if one is growing much more rapidly than the other, because that's not what society wants. That doesn't correspond to the demand for electricity out there in the economy if you're building too much solar too quickly and not enough wind. So somehow these criteria have to reflect that.
Correct. And you are very right that the balanced mix is very important also for achieving cheap electricity and offering cheap electricity to consumers.
Yes. Yeah.
And this brings me to my next question or my next issue. Renewables are for the consumers, and we all know and we all want to have, in an effective way, offering cheap electricity through the markets from renewables to the consumers. We have several instruments and several options, CFDs, corporate PPAs, PPAs with the retail suppliers, auctions, and on top we have the marginal pricing, which is very important in order to provide to the investors the correct signals to invest in the proper technologies. So how we mix all this, how we secure that we will continue offering cheap electricity through the markets to our consumers.
Electricity markets, as they're currently designed across Europe with the marginal pricing, they are sending clear signals to the investors who want to put their money in wind and solar. If you try changing those rules, the investors will go away. And those of you who are investing know that far better than I do. So don't touch the rules. Don't reopen them. It's a Pandora's box if you try to. At the same time, we have to max out on CFDs and PPAs. And the Greek system is a very good one, providing CFDs, allowing PPAs. Then whoever's investing has a perspective of stable revenues for the first 15, 20 years of their project. They can go to the banks like what they see, they can see they're going to get paid back, they will lend debt to those projects, which means the projects don't have to rely so much on the more expensive equity. We all know that the big cost and the big challenge with renewables is that upfront investment and the capex, and it's therefore crucial to manage the financing costs, the costs of capital. And that's what CFDs and PPAs do. They manage the costs of capital, which make renewables even cheaper for the consumer.
Fully agree, and I have to add that apart from the renewables asset, we need also flexibility. And we see that EU regulations provide a clear priority to clean flexibility, storage, interconnections, demand response. How do we think that we can exploit and build on the experience of Europe here in Greece in order to promote and to be forward in this path?
So the EU rules say that wind and solar must have equal access to the balancing and other ancillary service markets, voltage control, frequency control, inertia, and so on. That is not actually being applied in every country in Europe, and it must be. The EU is now looking to promote storage, and it wants to promote demand response. It has a target by 2030. The EU must have at least 100 gigawatts of demand response capability. To promote storage and demand response, you need to remove disincentives that are out there today. In some countries, I gather not in Greece, storage operators pay tax twice, when they buy the electricity in and then when they sell it on. And that double taxation clearly is a barrier to storage investments. There are lots of good things happening in wind now. Lots of wind farms being built with battery units inside them. I was at a wind farm in Romania recently that's now being taken on by PPC, the Fontanelle wind farm, one of Europe's largest. It's 600 megawatts of wind. They're developing 96 megawatts of storage and want 100 megawatts of solar PV in there as well. And the more you can hybridize the wind, combining it with storage and solar PV, the more stable the electricity we're providing becomes.
Very correct. Let's go to the next big thing. And then the next big thing is wind offshore. But here in Greece, we want to combine this with our opportunity to export also electricity.
Yeah.
And we want to increase our interconnection with Europe. And this requires a lot of capital. So we are looking here for a lot of capital for both offshore wind and large interconnection throughout the whole region. Are we going to expect some support from European funds or for private capitals? What are your view?
Yes, the EU wants to support this. It recognizes that the wind is always blowing somewhere. Yeah, more in some countries one day than in other countries. It was 37% of Greece's electricity supply on Wednesday, I think. Now, the key is to get the wind from wherever it's blowing to the consumers and where there is demand. And that means more interconnectors. The EU has a target, which is that by 2030, cross-border interconnector capacity, whether on land or at sea, should be 15% of total power generation capacity. We're a long way short of that target today. And it's very good that Greece has ambitious plans for exporting electricity to your neighbours and to countries elsewhere in Europe, because you have such fantastic renewable energy potential and capability already in this country, which you are expanding. And Europe is hungry for electricity, not least because we are now going to start seriously electrifying the European economy. Electricity is still only 23% of all the energy we consume in Europe. It's tiny. But when we're driving electric vehicles, we're heating our homes through heat pumps, and crucially, when heavy industry starts to electrify, and they want to do that, they want to be less dependent on fossil fuels as their feedstock. They want to decarbonize, they want to electrify. The steel mills want to go out of blast furnaces into electric arc furnaces. This creates huge new demand for electricity, which we are going to have to meet. So bring it on, as you would say in this country, bravo to Greece.
Thank you very much. My friend, I know that it is your first time here in Greece. We had yesterday some very important meetings. We are going to have today also some more meetings, very important. But I see that you wear a very nice tie with a Greek alphabet.
Thanks to you. Yes.
So should I take as a promise that you will visit Greece as well next time more often?
Certainly, yes. My first visit to mainland Greece.
Bravo.
Panayotis, and I am determined to come back frequently. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.